Good morning. This is the Board of Equalization meeting in Arlington, Virginia. Today is October 5th. We have 5 cases on the agenda. We're going to start with case number Economic Unit 1602602A, 1800 North Lynn Street. And we have Mr. Jordan Harmon. If you can start with your 8 minutes, please.
Yes, thank you. And this property, so this is a multifamily property and office and retail property, and these are both very high values. So I'd like to approach each of them separately as they are assessed separately as well. I'll start with the multifamily portion.
Jordan?
Yes, Eileen, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Which case did you call? I'm not sure that we have the right case.
It's Economic Unit 1602602, 1800
Right.
Lynn Street.
Thank you.
1800 Lynn. Okay, thank you. Yes, thanks, Eileen. I was on the wrong property. I apologize. All right, 1800 North Lynn Street is the Central Place Apartments and Retail Shops in Roslyn. This is located at Lynn and 19th Street. This property was built in 2017. Both components, the retail and the multifamily, were appealed. However, the county test for the retail component is acceptable to the appellant, so we're only going to be arguing the multifamily portion of the property today. The issues on appeal are the potential rental income, the vacancy, collection, rent loss, and concessions, and the operating expenses. First, I'd like to direct your attention to the DREA summary page on page 5 of the appeal. Please note that the data reported for 2018 and 2019 is the combined income and expenses for both the multifamily and the retail components of this property, while 2020 and 2021 columns separate the income and expenses attributable to each component. You can see from the summary page that the NOI reported at the apartments in 2020 was $9.3 million, and in 2021 was $9.5 million. This year-over-year increase is due to vacancy and concessions decreasing from 15% of GPI in 2020 to only 11% of GPI in 2021. The DREA test for the apartments imputes NOI at $10.1 million, which of course is $600,000 greater than what was reported in 2021. Now, how does the assessment arrive at an NOI that is so much higher than what the operating history of the property supports? First, the potential rental income imputed by the assessment overstates what the property actually generated in 2021 by nearly $300,000. Now, the county requested and was provided with a copy of the 12/31/2021 rent roll for the apartments. You can see this included on the appeal in edited form on pages 7 through 12. Page 12 shows a total annual rental amount based on this rent roll. This is close to what the county used on the DREA test in column F1 on the summary page. However, this fails to account for the concessions required to secure these tenants. The 2021 I&E survey shows that concessions were 4.6% of potential rental income. The rent roll provided shows 94% occupancy. This level of occupancy would not be possible without this 4.6% of concessions. If we deduct the 2021 concessions from the figure, we see that potential rental income is only $13.1 million, not $13.7 million that the assessment is used. This is consistent with the decrease in potential income the property experienced from 2020 to 2021. This adjustment is necessary as the county's vacancy and collection rate does not adequately capture the amount of concessions required at this property over each of the past 2 years. Next, the assessment imputes operating expenses at a rate lower than what the property has historically required to operate. Here, it's important to note that the county relies on forward-looking income, but prior year actual operating expenses. This is inconsistent. If we're going to rely on the forward-looking income as the assessment has done, we should also rely on forward-looking expenses. Alternatively, if we're going to use prior year actual operating expenses as the assessment has done, we should also use prior year actual income. You'll also note that the expenses have dropped over the past 3 years as the income has also dropped. They've been moving in lockstep with each other. What the assessment does is project the income will increase with no concurrent increase in operating expenses. The assessment initially did project an increase in operating expenses in 2022, but then decreased this figure to the 2021 rate upon their review. The prior 2 years have averaged $3.3 million in expenses. So to summarize, the property's NOI was only $9.3 million in 2020 and $9.5 million in 2021, yet the assessment is at $10.1 million. This is the result of the assessment overstating potential income by not accounting for concessions and understating the operating expenses. As such, the taxpayer respectfully requests the assessment be reduced as set forth in the appeal. Thank you. And Eileen, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I do not. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Harmon. We have Mr. Roskin for the department.
Thanks, Board. Okay, with Central Place, yes, we looked at both components, both the apartment and the retail, and we did do just a small reduction on the retail, looking at the rent roll. But on the apartment side, the income that we used, yes, I did have the opportunity to analyze the rent roll for the apartments, and we used just a very modest 2%, roughly a 2% increase in rent, because we are trying to project forward for the 2022. And so we felt that the income is very reasonable in our test column F1, and we pretty much just mimic the parking and the other income and the RUBS, just pretty much mimic what was being reported for 2021. As for the expenses, we also took a look at the expenses and we thought, okay, this is what's reasonable as compared to the 2021. Other than that, that's all that I have for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go to questions from the board. Anybody has any questions?
Yeah.
Mr. Hoffman.
Just for the appellant, I went through and kind of spot checked some of the rents in some of these units year over year. Can you give us like maybe the trend? I guess the argument is down, but are the same units that rented in 2017 or 2019? I mean, percentage-wise, are they renting for breaking even, still flat, lower 2%, lower 3%? What's the kind of the average trend going on there?
So on a unit by unit basis, I do not have that detail for you, Mr. Hoffman. I do have overall potential rental, and if you give me a moment, I can try to spot check a couple of them and see same unit what it's releasing for. Unfortunately, I do not have data on individual apartments for concessions, so it may not be a complete apples to apples comparison, but let me see if I can gather something for you on a couple of unit types and see.
I actually can answer the question. The rental potential has gone down approximately 5% from 2019 to 2020 and from 2020 to 2021.
Okay, thanks.
Uh-huh.
Anybody else? Any other question? No? Okay, we'll go to wrap-ups. Ms. Raskin, if you want to begin.
Sure. So actually, I'm looking over our revision page and comparing it to the rent roll. When you look at the efficiency, what was developed with the efficiency, notice I only bumped it by $1. $1, okay? When you go down the line to the bedroom, let's see, one bedroom, I bumped it by $1 again, okay? And so $1 or $2. So basically I rounded it up to even numbers, all right? So let's say if it was $1,989 for rent, then I bumped it to $1,990, okay? We're not that exact in the department, okay? So our rent that we used for column F1 is like really close to what's being reported in the rent roll. And like I said, take a look at our expenses. Our expenses are in line with 2021. Other than that, I'm finished. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harmon, if we want to take a minute, please.
Actually, I'm going to just start. If I could ask you to turn to page, the board package, it's page 62. I don't know what it is in terms of the PDF you have, but you can see that the income has gone down about 5% from 2019 to 2020, and another 5% from 2020 to 2021. And that is the total potential rental income. So, you know, I'm not sure how Ms. Roskin is deriving her numbers. I think that, you know, in terms of those numbers, she's looking at a snapshot in time that doesn't reflect the rents that are actually being achieved at the property, and that once you do look at the actual income stream as reported on the certified income and expense survey forms as reflected on page 62, you can see that number has trended downwards. And the difference in 2021 or the 2022 assessment is, the bottom line is the county has increased the NOI by $600,000, and the assessment is a 7% increase based on that NOI. That's a NOI increase of 7%. So I think you need to look at the total picture and not just at the one item. Jordan, we might have a little time. Do you want to add anything?
No, that's exactly it. NOI's up. The assessed NOI represents a 7% increase over 2021. So that's the long and the short of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's among the board. Anybody has any comments on where we stand on this one?
I mean, the only reason I asked that question about individual units is it looks like kind of the first couple of years this property was open, there was some pretty hot numbers for one beds, and I know somebody who lived there. It was kind of like the exciting new place. This is like the new restaurant opened in the neighborhood and everybody wants to go try it out. So they were getting $350, $360 rents on one bedrooms. And then I just started pulling data points from 2020 and 2021, and those same units are $250, $275 a square foot, which is a significant drop. So that's where I just have an issue with raising the assessment, because I kind of see the dynamic that might have been going on there.
Okay, thank you.
Greg, do you think the assumption that Lori made or the county made about the increase, you think is just a little too aggressive?
I think the potential income is going down.
Yeah, the only thing I saw that I questioned, I'm not saying I'm there, but to go from it does seem like it's a high jump. And in 1 year, can you make that jump? Really, that's the only question I have.
Expenses account for it somehow?
Well, their expenses are the same, aren't they? Didn't the applicant accept the test expenses?
They're the same as the appellant's pro forma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the question is are they going to get that much more? I don't think it's parking or anything else. I think it's just, are they going to get that much more?
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning towards just taking the 2021 apartment gross income, which is a little bit lower, 200,000 below the test column.
Go with last year's assessment?
Yeah.
Well, does anyone else agree? I guess.
Well, the only thing I did is I went back and I looked at the expenses. I know they are in line, but originally the county had used a higher rate for the apartments.
Mm-hmm.
And I increased that by just about the same amount to $925. And I come up with a lower value overall. The retail stayed the same. By making that change, I come up to a value of $208,108,100 round.
What did you do, Jose?
I increased the expenses on the apartments.
Oh, wow, okay.
And
Right.
what did you increase it to, Mr. Penrose?
925.
Well, I'd be okay with that.
And overall, it brings it back to just about what it was in the original assessment.
Yeah, I mean, I was within $200,000 of that
Uh-huh.
total.
I would prefer to, make a cleaner adjustment that way rather than going back just to.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree with Mr. Penrose. It's cleaner.
yeah.
Sounds good.
All right,
Okay, I'll go ahead and move then that we reduce the assessment to 208,108,100 based on increasing the expenses on the apartments to 925.
Now, second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second by Mr. Lawson. All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. The reduction is made to $208 million, 108, 100. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and turn over the meeting to Ms. Dooley, since all the technical issues are resolved.
All right, I can see everyone. Thank you. Okay, moving along on the agenda. The next case is RPC 14051-019, 4420 Fairfax Drive, also known as site plan number 331. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property.
Yes, thank you. So 4420 Fairfax Drive, this is currently a 58,000 square foot office building. It's located at the southeast corner of Fairfax Drive and North Vermont Street. It's right at the intersection of Glebe and Fairfax and Ballston. Now, if you'd be so kind as to direct your attention to page 62 of the appeal, you'll see this is where we outline our case. This property is valued as a site plan. It was approved in 2006 for the development of 237 multifamily units, along with 9,200 square feet of commercial space. The assessment values the property as a development site and applies a uniform rate of $86,000 per unit to the multifamily portion and $65 per FAR to the commercial portion to arrive at the assessed value of just under $21 million. However, this property has not moved forward with the development because it has not been financially feasible to do so. It has not been financially feasible to develop this site at any point over the prior 16 years, largely because of the extraordinary community benefits and street vacations that the site plan requires. The community benefits and street vacations required by this site plan are over $14 million as of 2019. This level of community benefits is greater than similar multifamily development plans, and the county has failed to acknowledge the increased expenses required by this development on the assessment. If you direct your attention to argument number 4 on page 62, you can see where the county's error in the assessment is from. The county stated last year that the required community benefits package had been reduced in 2019 from $11 million to $6.86 million. This is shown on page 74 of the appeal. This, in fact, misstates what actually happened in 2019 with the site plan extension. The 2019 extension actually increased the community benefits from $11 million to the current level of $14 million. You can see this on the last paragraph of page 67 of the appeal. This community benefit requirement is unique for this property in that most community benefits are not assigned a dollar value on the site plan, rather list items that the developer must complete in order to earn the bonus density for the development. These can take the form of landscaping, widening sidewalks, installing community art, and often a dollar figure is not assigned to those. Here, we have $14 million spelled out in the site plan. Now, by misunderstanding how the community benefits were adjusted in 2019, the county does not fully understand the cost required to make the site plan legally permissible. Essentially, what the county is implying is that the site plan has $6.8 million in community benefits that must be spent for the project to be built, and that the assessment is uniform with this level of community benefits. Knowing that the actual community benefits are over $14 million, It is clear that the site plan is not uniform for this area with regards to the community benefits required to build, and the extraordinary community benefits required at this site need to be taken into account on the assessment. The county has not disputed that $14 million is the actual amount of community benefits required by the site plan. As such, the assessment should be reduced by the difference between the actual community benefits required by the site plan and the amount the county believes is required, which is to say the assessment should be reduced by $7.28 million to the claim value of $13,705,918. Thank you. And Eileen, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Just that the difference in value on a per unit basis, the extraordinary community benefits that were disputed by the county last year and is saying that the assessment was fair are equal to $30,700 per developable apartment unit. And that is the reduction that we're seeking, because that is not a uniform or typical amount of community benefits. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chikas for the county, please.
Yes, ma'am. I think there's already been some misstatements. This property was not heard last year. It was withdrawn by the appellants. I think they're referring to 2020's appeal, in which we did actually misread the requirements for the site plan approval. But I would note too that it's still being misread. We've heard community benefits said at least 8 to 10 times. The $6.85 million is actually required for the additional density that the owners asked for. So it's not a community benefit, it's a quid pro quo. To get the units that they've asked for and the additional height of the building that they asked for, they had to contribute money. The board's heard this many times, many times. In fact, you heard this 2 or 3 weeks earlier. Traditionally, if it's not a by right, if it's a special exception site plan 4.1, there's going to be quite a bit of back and forth as far as what the county would like and what the developer would like to get that property approved. In regards to the 6.8 million, it is actually noted in the most recent site plan renewal. That's one thing that was also not noted. The site plan was actually set to expire this December 31st. The owners went to the county board and asked for an extension for an additional 3 years, which was granted. At the time of that granting, I would point out on page 7 of the most recent site plan, which would be your page. I'm sorry. Try to find it, but regardless, it says conclusion. Staff recommends approval of the amendment to the site plan condition, which permits the county to relieve the developer of the obligation to partially design and construct the Ballston West Entrance project in exchange for LEED Gold certification and a cash payment equivalent to the current market value of the additional density. Now, the additional density was valued at 6.85. The other community benefits, which I believe the opponents are noting, were street easements, vacations. So it's not much of a community benefit. It's a street easement that's needed for this project to take place. So again, we've seen this many times before. In fact, the board has heard this previous case and has confirmed it every time they've heard it, except for last year's withdrawal. Nothing's changed except for an amendment to extend the life of this site plan. So to say that the plan is onerous and is not able to be fulfilled, but then ask for an extension, this seems doesn't quite match up. So given that, again, this site plan has remained unchanged except for an amendment to allow the developer to partially relieve themselves of the street easements in regards to paying out the cash equivalent of the additional density and LEED Gold certification, as well as, again, the idea that they asked specifically for the board to extend this plan another 3 years. We do believe that the board should confirm this site plan at a value $20,981,000. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from any board member? Mr. Hoffman.
Just wanted to double check, because it's not in the package, but we have a vacant office building on the property with 57,836 square feet of office and some retail. Is that true?
It is not vacant. I'm sorry, Eileen, go ahead.
The office is currently being occupied and rented. It is being rented on a, with a termination possibility.
Okay, and then there's a note about a site plan amendment or something to allow daycare use on the site. Is that for the future building or is that the current building?
That's the current building. There is currently a daycare in there, the children's schools.
Okay, and is that the right square footage, like 57,800, something like that?
We have, yes, total NLA 58,330 square feet.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. Any final questions? Okay, Mr. Cheekis, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, ma'am. Just again, point out that owners asked for an extension. This is at least the second, if not third extension that they've asked for. They have the amendment in 2019 that would allow for this additional density contribution of $6.85 million to be paid out so that they can essentially divest themselves of the obligation to build towards the Ballston Metro entrance. The county's essentially said that that's taken them too long, so they'd like to proceed without them. Again, given that this site plan was set to expire this year, the owner decided to ask for a 3-year extension, was granted. They've received LEED certification, etc. We do believe the site plan has been valued with equity, just like the other site plans have been valued without any adjustments made for these quid pro quo adjustments. So I do believe that the original assessment should be confirmed at $20,981,000. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Borman or Mr. Harmon, if you have anything to conclude in a minute, please.
I think it's very important to note that getting rezonings in the county is expensive, and so agreeing to extend a site plan is what most people would do. The owners of this property have actually marketed it on a number of occasions, and nobody has been willing to purchase it for what they could cover their debt on the property for. Mr. Cheekis mentioned that the owners could buy the additional density at the site for the figure of approximately $6 million. That said, the site doesn't have that density associated with it at this time. They have to pay $6 million to get that density. So that density should not be assessed on this site because it does not currently exist. Only the right to buy it exists. So I think that, the last couple of years, this has been a difficult property to get our arms around. And it was withdrawn last year. It was withdrawn because we didn't have a great understanding of the costs associated with purchasing that density. But at this point in time, that density is not on this parcel and should not be assessed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Okay, it's just among the board members. Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start off. And I'll share that Colonial Village right across the street. That was approved with a very similar construction of an entrance into the metro. The way it works with bonus density in Arlington is if you don't want that bonus density, well, then you don't buy it. And the county is pretty much the seller. So it's the same as buying from, the property owner. And the county gets an appraisal. They figure out what it's worth a square foot. Sometimes we try to negotiate the community benefits in a manner that a percentage of it will end up helping our own site. For example, the gold certification. And there are other things that might bring value to your own site that aren't purely a gift to the community. Probably the property owner might well have wanted to have a set figure rather than to do a design and implement a program for this. Now the one thing that we do have to remember is that this site plan is not vested. It's something that the applicant can use if they choose to. If they don't want to use it, then it can expire and it's all over. My understanding is, and this is just an understanding, I don't know if this is true or not, My understanding is that this property owner is going to come in and they're going to try to lower this somewhat, and some other developments nearby are going to pick up on it. Like I say, that's just been some talk by the staff. I don't know if that's going to happen. But the bottom line for myself is that I think until they let this site plan expire, they're probably going to utilize it. And the county charges for its alleys and its street right of way that it vacates. And in this situation, they've charged what they consider fair market value for the density. So I think it's the same as a seller sells on the property and takes back a promissory note or something. So I'm okay with where the county is.
Okay. I just, from a simplicity standpoint, from a standpoint of equalization, the bottom line is it's assessed on the site plan. So, you know, whether they purchase the additional density or not, or, you know, question the community benefit, to me, the value is based on the site plan. If they aren't going to utilize it, like you said, they can let it expire, they can go and amend it, there's other options. But from the standpoint of equalization, I don't see where there's any room to move from the value that's been set.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you know, I mean, this site plan's been in existence for something like 20 years or 16 years or something. It's been, so if they were going to, if this really wasn't economically feasible, they'd have let it go, I think.
Right. Okay, anybody else? No? All right, then I'm going to move to confirm. I don't know whose phone that is. I'm going to move to confirm the county at 20,981,000. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, motion and a second by Mr. Penaranda. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. The county is confirmed at the 20,981,000. Thank you.
Thank you. And Madam Chairwoman, just briefly, I want to note, Mr. Chica stated I made a misstatement. That is incorrect. The documents I referenced are included in the appeal. So just for the record, I wanted to state that. Thank you.
Duly noted. Okay, the next case on the agenda is RPC 1801311 at 1210 North Garfield. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property.
Actually, Madam Chairwoman, if I might interject, this property is valued at $185 million. And unlike a lot of properties that we hear that have a number of different tax map parcels, but one economic unit, this parcel of property has one parcel, but two separate valuations. One is an office retail building that's assessed at about $110 million, and the other is a, excuse me, that was the apartment component, and then the retail component's about $60 million. We would like to break the case up so that it's clear. The worksheet, the county's test sheet, has like 14 columns on it, and we feel like it would be much easier if we addressed the apartments first and then the retail office portion second, if that's okay with the board.
Okay, I think you can go ahead and do that. So you're going to speak specifically about just the apartment portion?
To start with, and then we were hoping if you had questions, and then we could do the retail portion, just because otherwise it's just so confusing. The retail office portion.
All right, just due to the fact that we're getting these cases so late and there is a lot of information on this grid, I'm going to go ahead and allow that. We'll do the questions, but it will be all voted on in one. It's a combined package. So
thank you. Mr. Harmon will be presenting.
Okay, Mr. Harmon.
Yes, thank you. So 3010 Clarendon Boulevard, also 1210 North Garfield Street. This is a mixed-use 244-unit multifamily unit. This property has seen declining NOI over the past 4 years on both the multifamily and the office and retail portions. Apartment potential income has decreased from $7.8 million in 2018 to only $7.1 million in 2021. This property, it's important to note, was built in 2010, and in this area, it was a hot, new, happening property, and that's why you've seen rents decline in recent years as the property ages and is not as competitive with newer product on the market. If you direct your attention to the DREA summary on page 4 of the appeal, you'll see that there There's a lot going on this page. And I really appreciate your attention to this case as we explain the merits of the appeal based on the operating history of the property. And as you bear with me, I'm going to try to not get bogged down in this summary page that the county's provided. So to address the multifamily portion, I'd like to refer you to the appellant's pro forma on page 39. I know that for me, at least, the county summary page is a little difficult to keep track of. So on page 39, just for your information, the DREA test on the multifamily imputes NOI at just under $5.7 million. You see that's down from the initial assessment at $5.84 million. Working across the prior 3 years, the reported income, reported columns, we see that gross potential income has decreased from, again, 7.9 million in 2019 to 7.8 million in 2020 to only 7.1 million in 2021. The 2021 assessment imputed 8.1 million in gross potential income. In the year since the last assessment, gross potential income decreased by over $600,000. Yet the assessment increased by $500,000 over the prior year assessment. This results in the assessment overstating gross potential income by $1 million. This property has never come close to the assessment's potential rental income since it was built in 2010. We see the declining profitability of the apartments when we look at the NOI achieved over the past 3 years as well. NOI dropped from $5.8 million in 2019 to $5.5 million in 2020, and it was only $5 million in 2021. Yet the assessment asserts that NOI should be $5.7 million, which represents a $150,000 increase even over the 2021 assessment, despite this property being less profitable on January 1st, 2022 than it was 1 year prior. This is simply not supported by the operating history of the property. Even the December 31st, 2021 rent roll that was filed with the appeal, which shows actual rents being paid as of the first of the year, shows gross potential income of only $7,063,000. This is if we impute rent on the vacant units at the average rental rate. Despite the NOI decreasing over the past 3 years, showing a clear trend, we are not claiming a further decrease for 2022. Rather, we're just asking that the 2021 NOI be used to assess the property. As the county is wont to say, assessments are annual. If the income increases over the course of 2022, then I'm sure the county will assess accordingly. But again, we have a trend. As the county is also wont to say, 1 year does not an assessment make. Here we have 3 years, declining each year. Looking at the trends, a decline is likely. We're just asking for the 2021 NOI. Thank you. And Eileen, do you have anything you'd like to add on that?
Just it's, if you look at the 2021 assessment on page 39, the NOI is $500,000 greater than what was achieved in 2021. And the county's test, the income's going down, but the county's test NOI goes up. It just doesn't make sense. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chicas on the apartment portion.
No, we're going to talk about this entirely. It's a mixed-use property. The board's seen a number of these this year. Seen these last week. I don't know why this is made to be that this is confusing or, this is truly something you've seen all throughout the year. If the owner wanted to have 2 different valuations, they could have gone through land records, split this up, had a land condo declaration made. In fact, the appellants represent owners that have done just that. In fact, I believe you heard the first case today was split up that way. So no, we're going to be presenting this the way it's been valued, which is as a mixed-use property, which is made up of an apartment component and a retail component. And I think they did that purposefully because by isolating just the apartments, of course, you ignore the success of the retail component. We don't dispute that the retail side has gone down 3 years in a row. I think there was a misstatement by Mr. Harmon that it went down in 2019. Apartment rents actually went up in 2019, modestly, but they went up. So we did see 2 years of decline. We did note that, but again, because this is a mixed-use property, we're looking at the total valuation. What is the total gross potential income? And in doing that, as we noted, the appellants pointed out, 1 year does not an assessment make. Now, that being said, they went ahead and capitalized the 1 year of 2021's apartment income, but they did adjust some of the retail, which we appreciated. Looking at it from a stabilized point of view, let's just look at columns E45, which is the total NOI for 2018, I45, which is the total NOI for 2019, and M45, which is the total NOI for 2020. You can see again was doing quite well, very stable. Those numbers grew in 2019 and did go down a bit, almost 2% in 2020, but essentially to where they were in 2018. The biggest drop we saw was in 2021. Again, the board has seen this numerous times this year, whereby the board, the owners drop some rents to fill up occupancy and take care of what they would feel is a drop in income due to lack of people in the building, if you will. We noted that, and in fact, if you look at the revision, I will say that the revision made on the gross potential for the apartments was a bit aggressive. That is to be noted. But also, I would point out that, as again the board has seen numerous times, this property is nowhere near 8% vacancy and concessions. Doesn't matter if you look at it as for total of vacancy and concessions or just true vacancy. They've been averaging somewhere in the area of 4.5%. If we're looking at true vacancy and concessions from last year, it was approximately 6.5%, but that's still 1.5% lower than what's being offered by the county as far as a vacancy. And that's just for the apartments. The retail loan's getting 12%. So we do note that there is a downturn. We asked the board to again focus on the effective gross income at the property, which again is down below years 2020, 2019, and 2018. That's because again, we do note that what was achievable at the property continues to be achievable, even if there shows a downturn in 1 year of 2021. In regards to the retail components, we would note that their largest tenant, Trader Joe's, is there through, I believe it's another 10 years. We have another appellant, Circa, who's there another 5 or 6 years. So most of the retail is actually well established and will be for the next number of years. Again, when we're looking at stabilized numbers, our projections for operating expenses, it was not noted at all, but it's over $110,000 higher than what was achieved last year. Operating expenses have gone down 3 years in a row. Again, because we stabilized them, because 1 year does not an assessment make, we actually increased them by almost 3.5%. Because we do realize that as that property increases, and again, the residential component we noted was at 97% occupied as of January 1st. So we do believe that there is going to be more potential to increase rents. That being said, we recognize the downturn in effective gross. We stabilized that over the last 30 years. If you look at a 3-year average, if you look at a 2-year average. In regards to operating expenses, again, it's higher than it was achieved in 2021, higher than it was achieved in 2020. So we've established that we've stabilized a 3-year history, if you will. Looking at the NOI for the property, again, it's well within not only a 2-year average, but a 3-year average. We've reflected the downturn. But again, look at the NOIs for years 2018, 2019, 2020. So only look at 2021 to retrade what was achievable in years 2019, 2020. When we're looking at the overall valuation, we did note that it was almost 2.5% decline from last year's. The appellants are asking for 12.5%, almost 12.5% decline. It's just too much, again, given what the history has been achieved in 2018, 2019, and 2020. Even if we, as we talked about, put more weight on 2021 and less on 2018, you still would have to acknowledge 2019 and 2020. Given that we did so, we treated this property as we do all other mixed use, and again, acknowledge that we were a bit aggressive on the apartment side, but less so on the retail side. The total net operating income is supportable, and we do believe that the value of $170,584,100 should be confirmed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from any board members, since the appellant did not discuss the retail portion, so let's just try to keep the questions on the apartments. Does anybody have questions on that portion? No? Okay. Then, Mr. Harmon, if you just would like to conclude what I think you've got about 3 minutes left on your clock for the retail portion.
Yes, thank you. So retail rental rates have declined by 7% over the past year alone. Office rental rates have declined by 10% over the past year. These are based on the most recent leases signed at the property. If you'd be so kind as to direct your attention to page 38 of the appeal, you'll see our pro forma for the office and retail space. The DREA test imputes, it's on the summary on page 4, but I'll explain the discrepancies between what the stabilized potential and the test column. This is for the sake of your eyes. The issues with the DREA test for the office and retail portion of the property are very simple. The test column imputes office and retail rental rate at a weighted average in-place rents. They make no deduction for concessions. This is inconsistent with how other properties are valued in the county. The test column does not acknowledge 12,000 square feet of vacant space at the property, and the test column decreases operating expenses from the $12.61 initially assessed to only $9.78 on the revision. The stabilized potential column on the appellant's pro forma, we use the actual in-place leases for both office and retail space. Then we deduct the county's standard 6% concessions on each. The county simply uses the in-place rate without accounting for concessions. This is incorrect. It is not similar to how other properties in the county are treated. You can also see that the county imputes the vacant office space, the 12,000 square feet of vacant office space, at the leased office rate. We have imputed the vacant office rate at $48 per square foot, which is consistent with the most recent leasing activity at the property. Finally, the assessment initially considered operating expenses from 2018 and 2019. The last 2 years, occupancy was stabilized and the property was unaffected by the pandemic. The initial assessment imputed operating expenses at $12.61. This is in line with the 2018 and 2019 operating expenses. On the test, the county only looked to the 2021 actual operating expenses and used that rate. The 4-year average operating expenses are $11.13 per square foot. Our stabilized column grows the 2021 rate by 5% to account for the increased use and inflation. As a final note, you may look at the test value compared to the initial assessment and think that it's a pretty good reduction. However, this reduction is primarily due to the county acknowledging on the test that the property has a lease in place for 10,000 square feet for 99 years at only $1 per year. This lease is to a nonprofit and it was required as part of the site plan approval. A large part of the difference between the initial assessment and the revised is that this 10,000 square feet of $1 a year lease space was taken out of the revised. Thank you, and thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions from board members on the retail or anything? No? Okay. Mr. Chikas, if you take a minute to give us any final comments.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, so they took the time to point out that they wanted this valued as an office, but they're happy to use 7.155% cap rate. If you'd like to value that as an office, I present that 6.55% cap rate, which would be applied for the offices. The commercial retail component was given 13% vacancy, as detailed on that revised mixed-use worksheet. So again, we value this as a mixed-use property, PCC 215. The board's seen this many times. We ask that the board look at this as a total property, and you can see that the valuation revision made is reflective of conditions at the property, especially considering the profitability in 18, 19, and 20. Therefore, we do recommend revision be confirmed at $170,584,100. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to give us any final comments.
Yes, thank you. So the county mentioned on the multifamily portion that 8% uniform vacancy and collection is generous for this property since they didn't reach that. That 8% is required by uniformity. So, it seems that they're saying, well, we gave you more on this, let's get it back on the rents. That's not how assessments are supposed to be made. I refer you back to page 39 of the appeal. You can see the 3-year operating history at the multifamily portion. NOI goes from 5.8 million in 2019 to 5.5 million in 2020, then down again to 5 million in 2021. The county can split hairs all they want on individual, minutia in the assessment. The bottom line is that NOI. That NOI is precipitously decreasing, yet the assessment is increasing. Something's not lining up there. As for the retail and office portion, the county did not make any deduction for concessions. That's not uniform. The county also did not value the vacant space as vacant space, rather as leased space. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's just among the board members. Where is everybody on this? Mr. Hoffman.
I mean, I'll start. There's a lot going on here. I kind of did my own valuation on this thing. I came up pretty close to the revised county's number, a little bit below. So I'm kind of curious if anybody else saw a reduction there.
Yeah, what did you do?
I took it as a 10 million NOI at a 6 cap.
Oh. All right. I'm going to suspect Mr. Penneronda's not going to care for that. Okay, other folks?
I mean, I would, like you said, I would rather keep the same, separate cap rates rather than one, combined, cap rate for the whole thing. And I think, looking at overall, I mean, I agree totally with the county. Everything is being in line. As a matter of fact, I think the NOI that they are using on the revised, I think it's, a bit lower than I would have come up with, but so I'm okay with the revised.
All right, other folks? Mr. Yates.
As I went through it, and I do see what they're talking about with the apartments, but it does balance out, and I saw that the county was pretty reasonable in it. I didn't disagree with them. I can't see cutting the value that much.
Okay, Mr. Lawson?
I think the county's a little bit aggressive on the apartments, but I think I may be the sole believer of that.
I think that's where it balances back out again with the retail.
Yeah, I know, but you gotta go up so much. You gotta go up so high per month per unit that I just don't know if you can get there.
I just don't see it. I don't see the value of this building dropping.
Yeah, no, I agree with Mr. Lawson on that. Does the retail do enough to make up for it? I don't know. If you look at the difference between the actual in E2 versus F2, it's still a little high there for me. Mr. Huffman, you had your hand up. Did you have something?
Yeah, I was just saying, it doesn't help that we're not even using the office cap rate, and then we're saying we have to use the cap rates for the guidelines, but the county's picked out the 7 cap to use for the office space, and it just doesn't seem consistent. That's kind of where I was getting at, which is, Look at this. There's a couple of mixed-use properties like this in the county, and there's a lot of them across the country, and you can derive a grocery-anchored apartment building with a couple of floors of office based on actual transactions, and I think that's somewhere around a 6. And as far as the NOI goes, it's like I just look every single year. This thing is just printing 10 million in NOI. So we could split hairs, and is it going to be 9.98 this year? Is it going to be 10.12? I think it's right around 10 million. So that's good enough for government work, if you will.
Okay. Anybody else?
I don't think I have three votes here, so I'm going to leave it to somebody else.
All right, would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll go ahead and move that we reduce the assessment to the revised number of 170,584,100.
Do I have a second? If we don't get a second, it reverts back to the original county.
I'll second.
Okay. A motion and a second by Mr. Yates. All in favor? Opposed? So it's 3-2 without myself and Mr. Hoffman. The assessment's reduced to the county's revised number of $170,584,100.
Thank you, board. Thank you, county.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Eileen.
Okay, next.
Madam Chairman, could I explain the last vote? Would that be okay to take a second? I voted in favor, so it didn't go back to the original. I would have voted against, but then it would have gone back to the original.
No, I totally understand that, and I appreciate that you did that, because otherwise it would have been a worse situation. So thank you, Mr. Lawson.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda, do we have, I believe we saw Mr. Warren on. There he is. Okay. RPC 1404331 at 3900 Fairfax Drive. Mr. Warren, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property.
Okay, thank you, board. Thank you, Chris. I'd like to direct the board's attention to page 47 of 140, which is our summary of facts. This is the Quincy Plaza apartment complex located at 3900 Fairfax Drive. It is consistent of one tax RPT. It is originally assessed at $204,863,300. The county is recommending a revision to $188,080,600. The property was originally built in 2005, 499 total units, and it is a high-rise multifamily building in the Ballston, Virginia Square submarket. It's one building, 21 stories, and the apartment community consists of a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. There are 474 market rent units and 25 affordable units in the complex. I'll refer the board to page, I believe it's 3, their mixed use and expense summary for the property. The original assessment value of $204 million represented a 7.6% increase. The county's recommended revision of $188 million is approximately a 1% decrease from the 2021 assessment. However, it's important to consider that year over year, the net operating income from 2020 to 2021 decreased over 10%. If you look at the historical columns dating back to 2018, 19 and 20, which are found in columns A, B, and C, and then most recently in 2021 in column E, you'll see that the gross potential rent for this apartment complex dropped dramatically from 2020 to 2021. And you'll see that in 2020, the vacancy was higher than it typically had been at 5%. And they were typically offering less concessions. As you see in column E in 2021, concessions were increased to drive occupancy. That vacancy decreased from 4.89% to 3.5%. However, in addition to those concessions, they also had to lower rents to backfill that vacancy. Those rents are still lower as of the valuation date, and continuing this year. It's going to take a long time to slowly get back up to those rents, and that's where you're seeing the big differences currently between the 2021 reporting year and the county's test column. Gross potential rents were $12.6 million in 2021. In the county's revised column, they're still almost $200,000 above that at $12.8 million. And gross potential income, similarly, when you combine the revised columns are in F1, F2, and F3, report a total gross potential income of $14.877 million, which is almost $900,000 above what the property was able to generate most recently in 2021. Same for effective gross income. There's been a now 3-year trend, downward trend of effective gross income from 14.5 million in 2019 down to 14 million in 2020, and most recently a 7% drop to 13,011,000 in 2021. The county's revised test column is approximately $700,000 above what was most recently reported in 2021. The property is a stabilized property. It's operated at expense levels of 27% in 2019, 26% in 2020, and most recently 28%. The county in their revised column is using an expense rate of 27% of effective gross income. Similarly, net operating income has been on a steady decline dating back to 2019 at 10.5 million in 2019, 10.4 million in 2020, and most recently 9.35 or 9.36 million in 2021. The county's revised combined NOI sits at $10 million, which is again $650,000 above what this property was able to generate. Again, this is a little bit different property than ones we've been discussing in prior days, Cortland Towers and Randolph, which have had some higher vacancy due to some of the renovations of those units to maintain their rents to stay up in the market. Here, what we're seeing is higher vacancy and large concession packages and lowered rents to try and drive that occupancy. Those lowered rents are continuing into the future. The owners with Ditmar, representatives from the owner, Sophie Mao and Greg Rains are here. Greg, I don't know if you want to elaborate any more on the situation with Quincy Plaza as well as the next case, because they are similar in kind of the situations they sit in.
Yeah, thanks, Blake. Maybe I'll just say that the story is very similar for this case and the next case. And what we found in 2020, obviously we started the year in 2020 with normal rents, and when COVID hit, these properties stayed fairly stabilized until June or July. I think that the residents of these properties, North Arlington, young professionals, didn't really know what to do. But at both of the properties we're going to hear today, those were the folks that got out of town. And so that vacancy really hit between, we have a 60-day notice requirement, September, October of 2020 through April, May, June of 2021. And so for this property, we had 50 real vacants at the end of the year with another 50 upcoming. Virginia Square Towers, the next property, we had 75 real vacants with another 50 upcoming. And so it turned into a lease up. And so, yeah, we again, with Ditmar, we really believe in occupancy. We don't believe in vacancy to maintain rent integrity. So most of the 1-bedrooms at this property in Virginia Square Towers rented for $1,525 to $1,595 with the concession. And I could go through the different unit types and the amount that we discounted. But the point is those were year leases. And so they came up in 2022 this year. Did we give rent increases? Absolutely. But we're not able to go from $1,595 to a market rate of $2,495 without absorbing another lease up or crazy expenses. And so these properties specifically will take a long time to come out of what was a real trough and not a one-year blip that you can just jump right back out of. So this year, we said last year that 2021 was going to be worse than 2020. It was. We're saying that 2022 is not going to be as good as 2020 was going to be or 2019 was. It won't be. So I think that this 2021 valuation can't be $700,000 over what we made because we think we could have. We couldn't. That's the real number, and we're still climbing out of it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chicas for the county, please.
Yes, ma'am. It's funny, actually, I thought just looking at raw numbers, this is very, very similar to the last case, especially if we're looking at NOIs. 18, 19, 20, very stabilized NOIs. growth in 19, a bit of a downturn in 2020, but again, less than 1%. The downturn we saw was in 2021. We've seen this in virtually every case we've heard this year. We saw this in the previous 2 cases. 2021 was a bit tumultuous, as Mr. Ains just pointed out. They lost some vacancy and wanted to fill it up, so they lowered rents and increased concessions. That's essentially what I've been saying all year. But again, as was pointed out in the last case, and will be pointed out here forever, it's one unit is not an assessment make. We do look at these properties as stabilized properties. When you look at this for a 4-year history, or again, even place more weight in 2021, less on 2018, we do believe that, again, the revision is reflective of what happened in 2021. If we go down the line again, it makes sense, and it's the easiest number just to point out as the gross potential, the top lines. But again, I think the board is aware that we're a bit constrained with the idea of being mass appraisal. We offer guideline vacancy and concessions, so 8% gets applied. So there will be occasions where we either have to gross up that gross potential to get to the achieved effective gross, or we have to squash or depress that. In fact, we made that mention yesterday, where we were some $1.7 million below what was achieved at the property for gross potential. Sometimes we'll be higher, sometimes we'll be lower. What we're trying to do is get to a stabilized effective gross, apply the stabilized operating expenses, and get to a stabilized net operating income, which of course gives us the overall property value. When we're looking at this property, we did note the rent roll. We do again believe, as we've been consistent with all year, and I believe, as Mr. Ains just pointed out, that we're asking for a fairly modest increase for projections of rent that was established in 2021. 1%, 2%, 3% seems reasonable as far as an expectation for rents to be achieved, especially considering the rents that were achieved in 18, 19, and 20. Again, looking at parking, we made revisions to parking, again, reflective of what was achieved in 21, but again, that's a good bit below what was achieved in 18, 19, and 20, probably because some of that parking revenue was given away with some amenity or concession revenue takeaways, if you will. So again, we adjusted other income and utility reimbursements. That gave us a stabilized effective gross, which again is very much in line with years 19, 20, 21. In regards to operating expense, in fact, our operating expense is a higher projection than what was achieved at the property in 2021. It's higher than what was achieved at the property in 2020. Very much in line, again, with the last 3 years of stabilized operating history. The first thing I mentioned was the extremely stable net operating income years 18, 19, and 20. Again, we did see a downturn in 2021, but that was reflective in the revision. We do believe the revision accounts for that. And in fact, as was noted by Mr. Warren, we recommend a decrease from last year's assessment of approximately 1.2%, which again is much more in reason with what's been going on at the property compared to the appellant's almost 10% decrease year over year. Given the fairly stable, I should say very stable performance of the property 18 through 20, given the downturn that was reflected in the revision in 2021, we do believe that the revised value of $188,080,600 should be confirmed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, this is for the applicant. I believe I've got the right block that at the corner of 9th and Pollard, there's a surface parking lot. Is that owned by Ditmar?
No, 9th and Pollard?
Yeah, if I got the right block.
You talking about the corner of this property, like the opposite corner?
Yeah,
it's got a different owner in here.
Okay, it's a different owner. Okay.
Yeah, no, not ours.
All right.
Okay, any other questions?
It's got it as a medical center or something.
The doctors.
Yeah.
No? Okay, Mr. Chikas, have you taken a minute to wrap up, please?
Again, just point to the stabilized nature 18 through 20. Again, reflective of the downturn in 2021. We agree with Mr. Ains that it appears it was a reflection to increase occupancy through lower rents. We do believe that those rents will increase again, even if modestly, more to levels 19, 20, and 18. Again, the operating expenses were grossed up to reflect that increased occupancy that's expected. And we do believe that the revision NOI is reflective of the year 2021's downturn. We'd ask the board to confirm 188,080,600. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Warren, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yes, as we've previously addressed, large concessions, rents were lowered to drive occupancy to this property, which experienced a serious decline in 2021. As Greg has attested to, it's not a 1 year blip or outlier year. It's going to take years to increase back up to rental levels that the property was operating at prior to COVID. As also Greg has attested to in prior appeals, it's a very much a concession-driven market with these tenants signing 1 year leases and seeing once their term is expired, seeing across the street that they can get a 2 month off 12-month lease concession package. It doesn't necessarily promote staying occupancy when you're trying to increase rents. So it is a concession-driven market. It's going to take years for, again, this property to reach a stabilized level of rental income and increase rents to the levels they were pre-COVID, and we're hoping the board considers that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's just among the board. Where's everybody on this? Mr. Penaranda.
I'll go ahead and start. I mean, I don't really see making any other further change. I think the revision is more than reasonable, in my opinion. I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I agree. This doesn't give me nearly the angst that I had on the last case, but what do other people think? Mr. Lawson.
I'm also okay with the county's reduction.
Anything different from the other two?
No.
No? All right. Would someone like to make a motion? No.
I'll go ahead and move that we reduce the assessment to 188,080,600 based on the revision.
I'll second.
Okay, and Mr. Lawson is a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Yates, that's an aye?
Yes.
Yes, okay, opposed? Okay, so it's unanimous. It's reduced to the county's revised number of 188,080,600. Thank you. And moving to the last case on the agenda, RPC 1403502A at 3444 Fairfax Drive. Mr. Warren, you can start with your 8 minutes on this property, sir.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to direct the board to page 53 of 154 of the county's response memo to the board, showing our summary of facts. This is the Virginia Square Towers apartment located at 3444 Fairfax Drive. It is consistent of 2 tax RPCs, and the original assessment for 2022 was $238,947,200. The county is recommending a revision of $210,957,500. The property was originally built in 2013, 534 total units, a high-rise in the Ballston, Virginia Square submarket. It's 1 building and 13 stories tall. Again, moving on to the county's mixed-use income and expense summary sheet found on page 3. The original assessment value represented a 4.2% increase from the prior year's 2021 assessment. Now, the revised assessment is an 8% decrease from the 2021 assessment or the recommended value. However, again, it's important to note that year over year, the net operating income for this property from 2020 to 2021 decreased by over 14%. Again, looking at the history of reporting years that are found dating back from 2018 to 2021, columns A, B, C, and E, you'll see that, again, there's a large decrease in gross potential rent from 2020 to 2021, as well as gross potential income. and again, result in, because of the high vacancy that you'll see reported in column C for that year, and you'll see it lowered slightly in 2021. Very similar to the last property we just discussed. Rents were lowered, concessions were offered to drive occupancy to that property. However, it's going to, again, take many years to get back up to the rental levels that this property was formerly operating at. It's not a 1 year blip or outlier year. The effective gross income is experiencing a 3-year downward trend, a pretty drastic one, from 16.2 million in 2019 down to 15.3 million in 2020, and further down, an 8% decrease to 14,055,000 in 2021. The county's revised test column for effective gross income is approximately $800,000 above what the property was actually able to generate most recently in 2021. Operating expenses, again, this was similar to last property, a stabilized property, 23% in 2019, 23% in 2020, an increase to 28.5% in 2021. The county is, in the revised test column, is using an operating expense ratio of 25.5%. Net operating income, again, a 3-year downward trend, a significant downward trend in net operating income reported in each of the last 3 years. In 2019, 12.5 million, 11.7 million in 2020, and most recently, $10 million in 2021. The county's total revised net operating income in their test column of 11 million is approximately $1 million, again, above what this property was capable of generating in the most recent reporting year. Similar to, again, the last property, this property experienced a large number of turnovers in the end of 2020 and also in the beginning of 2021. Again, they had to significantly lower rents to drive occupancy to that property, and it's going to take, again, many years to be able to moderately increase those rental levels to achieve at the levels that they once were. Greg and Sophie, I don't know if there's anything you would like to add specifically for Virginia Square Towers.
Yeah, I mean, not much different than what we said last time, Blake. Other than this property, more than any of Ditmar's properties, was affected by really high turnover in a really pretty much, like I said, about a 7-month window. I think we turned over 270 units out of 530 in 2020 and 230 something in 2021, but like 400 of those were in that 6-month stretch. So again, we had 75. At the end of 2020, we had 75 totally vacant units, with another 50 that were coming up that were not re-rented. And so, it was a true lease up where we were giving free parking for a year, $15.95, $14.95 one bedrooms, concessions on top of that. And again, you can't just raise rents and get back to market. One, because the individual we're not, that's a 50%, 40% increase. The other thing is they qualify on a lower rent. And so a lot of times they're not able to pay that higher rent, and then you have turnover all over again. So the higher expenses and the lower rents do not go away after 1 year or 2 years. It takes a while. So I understand that we could pull a rent roll at some of these properties, but this property was the most affected by COVID as far as the decline in income and the time it takes to get back.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chikas for the county, please.
Yes, ma'am. So again, essentially looking at this property from the stabilized point of view, years 18 through 21, call it how you will. If we want to put more weight on 2021, seems appropriate given it's the most current year. Less on 2018, we still have to look at the years 19, 20, and 2021. As Mr. Raines pointed out, this one may be a little bit different in the sense of a bit more true vacancy. But again, the story's end, if you will, is the same in the sense that they're still doing the same things. They're looking to increase increase occupancy through lowered rents and/or concessions. Biggest difference here is the concessions stayed, if you will, from 2020 to 2021 and increased a bit. That being said, we still look at this as a stabilized nature. If we look at the revised mixed-use worksheet that we provided, you'll see that as we've done consistently, we took the residential rent roll for the rents that were achieved in the year 2021, and we applied a fairly reasonable 2% increase, a projection made for the year 2022. Obviously, that's somewhat based on the idea we know that the property will be 94% occupied. And again, if you look at those rents that were achieved in years 2018, 2019, 2020, this is a good bit below all those, almost $1 million less than what was achieved in 2020. So we are reflective of what's going on the ground. And in fact, you can see that again by looking at the effective gross that we've stabilized in our projection. That would be Q18. That's again, some $400,000 below 2020's number and almost a full $1.3 million lower than 2019's number. So again, very reflective of what happened in 2021, but looking at a big picture as far as years 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, again, even if you only place weight on 2019, 2020, 2021, in fact, even if you only place weight on 2020 and 2021, our projected effective gross income is essentially spot on. I believe it's $100,000 more than what was achieved the past 2 years, but lower than what was achieved the last 3 years. Same thing with operating expenses. Operating expenses are a bit lower than what was achieved in year 2021, but as you note with the yellow highlight, that was somewhat due to increases of almost 30% for maintenance and repair, 12% for subservices, for an increase of 12% year over year. When we're looking at the property, that's more than's been achieved by almost $300,000 in any other year. So again, looking at a stabilized nature, even putting more weight on years 2020 and 2021, we came up with our projected projection for operating expenses, which I would note is again almost $170,000 higher than the original projection. Going down to net operating income, again, very much in line with what's been achieved, some $700,000 less than what was achieved in 2020, and a full $1.4 million less than what was achieved in 19. Again, there was a downturn in 2021 that was fairly dramatic, almost 14%, but you could argue that was a fairly stabilized property years 18 through 20. Because we do look at this as a stabilized property, we believe that the projection made by the county was appropriate. I'm not sure if Mr. Warren noted, but we did note that this was an 8% decline year over year from last year's valuation, again reflective of what happened in calendar year 2020, but reflective of years 19, 20 as well. We believe that's more in line with the performance of the property as opposed to the almost negative 17% year over year recommendation by the appellant. We would point out, I think the board is aware, this is a well-located property, some 1 block from Virginia Square Metro, 4 or 5 blocks from Clarendon as far as nightlife and what these people who are renting tend to want to go out and do. We'd reflect the increased occupancy at the property again, which was what the property was trying to do by lowering rents in the first place. Offering concessions, lowering rents tends to get bodies in the door. We basically had that acknowledged in the last case. I think it's the same thing here. Given the reflection of year 2021's downturn, given the stabilized effective gross, given the stabilized operating expense projection made by the county, we do believe that the revision of $210,957,500 should be confirmed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, this is for the owner, probably Greg. How many George Mason University students do you reckon rent in this facility?
That's a good question, Barnes. I mean, we definitely have a decent amount. That college cohort at all of our properties went away for a little while. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but that's a percentage. I mean, irrelevant.
On the parking, you say you were giving away free parking. How many, I noticed that in the revision that you did, you had no parking. What was the actual parking income last year, do you estimate?
We did no parking, Blake. I mean, what do you mean we didn't? We had no parking.
Are
They
you
just
charging?
combine it. Yeah,
you
the
charging-
parking
This
income
is for
for,
the applicant.
Okay,
This is for the
Okay.
applicant.
Blake, we sent over the IME with the parking.
Yeah, it's in there. It's the parking is in our pro forma.
You were waiving
It's not.
parking for new tenants. How much got waived in your estimation?
Well, we did not charge for parking in 2021. I mean, the folks that stayed in the building, we rented the 230, 280 units that we rented in late 20 to 2021. None of them had parking. We gave free parking to everyone that rented from us for early.
Okay. Okay, that's my questions.
okay. And Mr. Chikas, I would ask that you answer when you're addressed, please. Thank you. Other questions from board members? No? Okay, Mr. Chikas, take a minute to wrap it up, please.
Yes, ma'am. Parking income last year was $343,231. It is reported as zero on the appellant's income because they rope it all into other income. So when we're looking at this property as a stabilized nature, again, we do account for the increased vacancy and concessions that were appeared in 2021. But again, we've done that consistently throughout the year. Please again look at the effective gross that was achieved in years 1920 as well as 2021. You'll see that our stabilization is well in effect. Operating expenses the same, again higher than what was achieved in 2019 and 2020, given the reflective 30% increase in maintenance and repair. Given the net operating income at the property 19, 20, 21, we do believe that the revision made is applicable and reasonable. Again, it's a year-over-year 8% decline in overall value. We do believe $210,957,500 should be confirmed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Warren, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yes, just regarding the parking, the prior 3 years from 18 to 20, parking income averaged roughly $450,000. And correct, Mr. Chica said the most recent 2021 parking revenue was $340,000, so over $100,000 decrease in parking revenue. The county's revised column has a parking estimate listed at $400,000. So again, still over $60,000 above what this property was able to generate in parking. Correct, the county's recommended revised value is approximately 8% lower than the prior year's value. But again, looking at the year-over-year income, this property almost had twice that amount decrease of over 14% in net operating income from 2020 to 2021. Greg, I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to follow up with.
No. I just want to make sure that everybody saw the parking because we're not hiding. It sounded like maybe we were trying to, but we're not. I mean, it's right there and it was down. And it's another thing that you got to come out of, right? You can't just all of a sudden say next month you start paying parking. It's part of the lease. So you got to climb out of that too.
Okay, thank you both. Okay, it's just among the board members. Where's everybody on this? Mr. Hoffman.
I just want to say first, I appreciate not charging for parking because you start charging and they're all going to be all over our neighborhood. So keep that going. And then, just my gut reaction to the $210 or $211 million assessment is that would indicate a 4.8 cap rate on the 2021 actual income, which I don't know if we've seen a sale that aggressive in Arlington, other than some real outliers that were like 1031 exchanges, and that was kind of earlier on, a couple years ago. So it seems high to me. I took a look at the 2021 NOI, the actual NOI, and put it at the lowest cap rate for the whole project at 5.15, and it's 195 million. So I think that's a little bit above what the appellant was looking for, but I think that's a fair number.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Mr. Lawson?
Yeah, I did something a little bit different. I mean, just, I just decided to take the department's revision and half the parking income. And I ended up, and when you take that all the way through, I ended up at 207,073,993. And the reason I did that is I'm actually involved in a property very close to this one. And I think George Mason is going to probably raise this. I think this property is going to get healthy fast as George Mason gets going and their project there that's under construction gets completed. But right now, that's not the situation. And so, I think the impact of what's going on in George Mason has taken this, because the applicant said this is the property that's had the greatest lease cancellations. I think that's probably because of Mason.
Mhm.
So that was my suggestion to go to. Yeah,
And the huge FDIC campus appears to be still in work from home mode.
yeah,
There's not a lot of people hanging around there.
yeah.
And Mr. Lawson, I'm sorry, can you just restate what you did exactly?
Yes, I took, is it F1, and I took the 403, and I, instead of using 403, I used 200. And then I came down, and then the value for the market units became 197, 178, 893. So I just deducted that from the 210, 210 million, ended up at 207,074.
400, okay. All right, Mr. Yates?
Even their 2021 was at 343.
Right, but it's in the meantime, they've accumulated a lot less people parking there. I don't know, it's a guess of what I thought would be fair.
All right, Mr. Penaranda?
I made a reduction also on the parking, but I didn't go as far as the 200. I went, I reduced to the difference that they requested, the 60,000 less, which is,
I thought about that.
yeah, and I thought that was fair compared to, what they had from 2021.
Yeah,
And, the panel agreed that that was the difference. And so that's the only thing I took, $60,000 from the top.
well, the reason I didn't go with the 60, Jose, is because their testimony was they're not charging any residents for parking. And obviously, eventually, they will start again. I just thought having it was appropriate, but
Mhm.
that's just me.
Mr. Penaranda, what was your final number?
Final number would be 209,885,700.
All right, so where is everybody on these different, we got options all over here.
I'm more inclined to agree with Jose. That's kind of where I was looking at it too. I think the expenses, I think the county, they could have gone allowed for a little more increase, but I'm okay with it. EGI, when you do that adjustment,
Mhm.
I think that's more where it should be.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. The other two, where are you?
I'm gonna go with Jose if no one's gonna go lower.
Okay.
All right, okay, Mr. Penaranda, would you like to make a motion?
Sure, I'll make a move that we reduce the assessment to 209,885,700 based on reducing the parking income.
By the 60K. Okay, we have a motion. I'll second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. It's reduced to 209,885,700 by reducing the parking by 60,000.
Thank you, board members. Thank you, Blake.
Thank you all.
That completes the
Good
agenda.
day.
Any other business?
You
No?
here tomorrow?
Okay, yes, we are. So we will stand adjourned now at 10:35. Reconvene tomorrow in person for Thursday, October 6th at 9 a.m. Thank you.
You know what, on that case for Eileen. If I had an
Thanks, Mary.
idea of
You want me
what
to
to
adjourn, Mary?
propose,
We did adjourn.
I would have done substitute motion. Because there's five, I believe, three of the voters.
Rosa.
But